All right. Welcome to UX and Coffee with Jen and Margie. Welcome, Margie.
Hi, I'm realizing I left my coffee downstairs. Oh, I'm jealous.
Oh, bummer.
That's okay. I am well caffeinated for this conversation.
That's the fun thing about doing these at noon Eastern.
Yeah.
Like my coffee's almost done. Sometimes I'm on my second cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today. I'm excited to chat with you. And, for everybody who's joining, excited for you all to hear our discussion. Margie and I have chatted a couple times now. And it's been fun because we're talking about the intersection of market research and user experience research. But then our conversation has just organically turned into tools we use and strategies we use to learn more about our customers and partnering with different people in our companies or the companies we're working with. So it's been really fun. And I thought it would be great to bring to everybody here today and, just have a fun, light conversation over coffee or not. So Margie, maybe it would be helpful if you can just share a little bit about your background and what you're up to these days.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Hi. So I'm Margie Agin, and I have a consultancy called Centerboard Marketing, which is kind of an intersection of product marketing and content marketing. That's kind of my sweet spot. I work with a lot of B2B technology companies. So I actually came into into market research as one of my first jobs in marketing. And I still, to this day, over a couple decades later, still find that to be a foundational part of what I'm doing, even if ultimately the output of the market research might be content, or it might be part of the sales process, or it might be part of branding, but it's still a foundational part of what I do. So I'm kind of coming at it from more of the market research direction than the UX research direction, I guess.
Yeah. I find a lot of intersections, like even as a UX researcher who's been doing this for many, many years, sometimes our work does touch on marketing. We partner with product marketers, internally who are doing their own research, but then they want to partner with us and we work together. And sometimes we're using different methodologies, but we have similar goals. Sometimes the goals are a little bit different, but I do find that there's quite a bit of overlap between the two.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of how you actually end up using the findings and the insights that you gather, definitely that could be potentially different. Your goal could be different. And I would never think of some of the things that I do. I'm not trained in, statistical analysis or sample sizes or, really the rigorous scientific side. So I actually consider pretty much everything that I do more directional and informative and almost contextual background information rather than definitively be able to say, this is exactly what the data says. And so I've got the statistical backup to prove something, but I still build it into the process in so many different ways. And a lot of it is qualitative. And that's why I say, directional and informative and contextual, because, I may talk to 5 people that are customers or prospective customers of a client of mine and start to hear patterns and start to hear the same thing, have really deep conversations where there's a lot of follow-up questions and they're in-depth interviews. That's still giving us our best guess at how to go forward rather than saying this is a proven statistical model.
But UX is like that as well.
Okay.
Right? Quantitative.
My perception is that it's
very
isn't that funny? Numerical.
Yeah, quantitative UX researchers will focus more on quantitative, right? Larger samples, oftentimes statistics. And then data scientists certainly do that. Data scientists usually are more looking at the data, the analytics. What are people clicking on? How long are they spending on pages? What are those patterns? So that side of UX tends to be more, it is quantitative. But a lot of UX research is qualitative. Like as you were describing your work, it's a lot of UX researchers who are tuning in right now, I think can relate, because a lot of what we do are in-depth interviews, contextual inquiry, right? It is in small samples, right? Like having a sample size of 5 people with iterative testing. So each time you've got 5 people, right? But like that's pretty common. 5 people or 10 people. It's actually quite common in our research, because what we're doing, and actually maybe this is a part of, maybe this is a point of difference. What we're doing is in classic usability testing, for example, we're assessing what's working well, what's not working well, and how to make the product better. Product being whatever. It could be usually what many of us are into are websites and apps, but also I've done a lot of work on forums and surveys, but it could be a physical product, right? It's like, how well does this work? What works well, what doesn't work well, and how do we make it better? And we put the product into the hands of the participants, of our users. We give them some tasks to do. Usually it's not just like an open thing, but it could be. And then we're assessing what's working well, what's not working well. We're understanding why it's not working well. And then we come up with solutions, sometimes in partnership with the designers and the developers, to make the product better. So you don't need a big sample to know that something's not working well. Right. If you want to understand perceptions and generalize to a larger group, that's where we need numbers, right? If we want to say on average, people are spending X amount of time on a page, or this is the behavior of a population or subset of a population, that's where we need the quantitative. But when we're identifying issues, we actually don't need a large sample at all.
Yeah, that's very, very similar. Because I work with B2B tech companies, also, I find that the people that we want to talk to need to be, they can't be the general population, right? Even from a technology perspective, these aren't consumer users, right? These are, for example, a director of an IT company, and it might not be or IT director of, let's say, a financial services company, right? And it can't just, so they have to know enough about the problem to be able to give us feedback that's going to be meaningful. And then you could segment even farther than that. Do you want somebody at a large company or a small company? Do you want somebody that's a current customer and already sort of has an affinity and an understanding of your product? Or do you want somebody that like brand new and hasn't solved this problem yet and doesn't even know if it's a problem? Totally different type of a scenario. And the process that we to go through to find those people, get them to talk to us. These are high value people whose time is extremely valuable. And you have better luck maybe talking to customers than non-customers because they have a little bit more skin in the game. But again, it could take weeks to get some of these folks on the phone and then really have that in-depth conversation. So if you get 5 people or 10 people, you're psyched that you were able to get that time in the process to talk to those folks. So that's that we have to go through and to make the most of those conversations when you have them.
Totally. I mean, we have those issues too. Whenever we have hard to reach populations, it's like we have to pay them a lot more for a 1 hour set. Maybe you only get 30 minutes with a neurosurgeon and you have to pay them hundreds of dollars for those 30 minutes. Whereas Gen Pop, it's pretty easy to recruit. And for an hour, I don't know, government is traditionally paying lower than, and actually you're in the DC area. I don't know if you work with government agencies, if you have any insight. Back when I was at the Census Bureau, I don't know if it's changed, but we used to pay $40 for a 1 hour session, it's quite low compared to what we typically pay people to participate in UX research. Is that similar in your field?
I don't know. I honestly have not paid in that same way with those types of incentives because, for example, if we're talking to a group of customers of a client of mine, we're typically not paying them for that. Their reward is more, they get input into the product development process and they feel like a true development partner. So they receive the benefits that way. I have also worked with panels that might gather people of a specific job title who have said that they're willing to sort of take a meeting and provide feedback. So in that sense, I've used some different kinds of panels where I'm not paying the folks directly, so I don't actually know how much they're getting paid, but I'm paying maybe for, the ability to talk to 25 people over a certain period of time, or something along those lines.
Mhm.
And so there might be that mix. And again, I'm saying, I want people of this size company who don't already own this product or who own this adjacent product or something like that, and they're willing to just sit down and have a conversation with me. I found that to be very useful. Sometimes that ends up being a sales lead, but that's not the main goal, right? And so you can't frame it in terms of like, I'm just going to pitch you my product. See how it's more, I have this new sales deck. I want to run this messaging by you and just hear how you react. You might get someone who says, that's really interesting. I would like to have a follow-up conversation. So maybe there's a double-sided benefit to that, but that's not the goal.
Yeah.
And then I've also used different types of, on the quantitative side, it's much more narrow a scope, and maybe you find this too. So because I can't have in-depth follow-up questions and really dig deep with one person, I've got to keep that scope really, really tight. So I've used quantitative kinds of tools that also gather panels and pay participants in some way to do some message testing. So for example, I have a blurb or like a new boilerplate or a new paragraph describing a product or describing a company, and I want to see how people react to that. Is it clear to them? Maybe I have two things I want to compare and I want to see which one they prefer over the other. So you ask things like, is this clear? Do you have any questions about this? Or is it confusing? Is it truly differentiated? Is this something that you think is unique to this company that you wouldn't read anywhere else? And does this make you want to take action, right? Is this intriguing and interesting enough to you that you would actually do something about it, which ultimately is what it accelerates the sales process in some way. And I know those people have some kind of an incentive, but they're more an incentive to be available when companies want to reach out to them rather than me directly paying the people.
Right, right. Yeah. Couple thoughts on that. I get that. We've done that. I guess that's more like B2B with businesses who are using the products. When I was at Google, we certainly did that. We would recruit businesses that used our products, and same, we weren't paying them because their benefit was the product gets better, right? That's better, much better than being compensated for, 30, 60 minutes. The other thing I wanted to mention is your content testing. So I didn't realize that was in your wheelhouse, because we certainly do that too. And one of the things I've talked about a lot with researchers is the importance of separating content from design, because oftentimes UX researchers will test an interface, anything, right? Like our screen right now, you might test this interface and you're testing the location and the color and the size of the buttons and the terminology on the buttons, but then you're also testing this other content to make sure it's understood. Like you said, is there anything confusing? Is there anything unclear? But meanwhile, the design can influence the interpretation of the content, right? If
absolutely. At every point along the way. I mean, it does for us as well, right? Even internally, if I'm do a lot of content creation, but I'm not a designer, right? So I partner with a lot of designers to try to, bring the story to life. And then if there's sometimes there's feedback that's like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like us. Well, what does that mean? Is it because the first impression? Is it because it was confusing? Is it because the like you said, the line break was in the wrong place, and so you lost the flow?
Right.
Or is it actually what I'm saying? So that's what I like. The system that I was talking about that does the message testing is called Winter, WYNTER. So what I like about that is you can just test the copy, or you can just test the message. I suppose you could show a landing page, right? But I think it's more effective to not show it within the context of the landing page, or not show it within the context of like a sales presentation, because then you're getting real feedback on the message versus the actual page. And then when you transfer it to the page, then you can start doing the behavioral kind of, click testing and things like that. Do people like it better with the button at the top, or the form at the bottom, or the navigation or no navigation, right? But all of those elements, I agree completely, get in the way of whether somebody is reacting to your message or they're reacting to the format.
Yeah, totally. Somebody says this doesn't feel like us. Are they actually talking about the content? Are they talking about the new logo? Right, the font, the color, something else on the page.
Professional.
Yeah,
It's the people that say, I don't really know what I want. I know what I like, but I can't really tell you. So that's where comparison for me, and I'm sure you do this a lot with UX testing, but even with message testing, if you just show one thing, and you might get some feedback. For example, if you were to just test one message and say, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you like this? And someone gives you a 4, you really don't know what to do with that information.
right.
Because you're only testing one thing and you don't know enough to know why they gave you the 4 or what changes you're supposed to make. It's almost like the confirmation bias of, well, I really like it, but I'm going to do some testing and send this past some customers and they're going to say, yeah, looks good, right? Check. But if you show 2 things and then you compare them and they're very different from each other, then you can actually start to see, well, they like this about this one or that about that one. That also causes other change because then you have to make a Frankenstein. But at least you have some you have some point of comparison to say this part was stronger here and this part was stronger here. And at least I know what to do now. Now I need a third version. Let me test that against something else. So that's something that I find that, in marketing, a lot of market research or testing can sometimes be a little bit performative, where we really just want to check the box and confirm that we ran this by a few people, as opposed to really wanting to dig into, which one performed best. And that sort of leads into why so many people think marketing is much more guessing and much more an art than a science. And, I know 50% of my marketing budget is working, but I don't know which 50%, and I don't think that, I think that gives us a bad name where we're not very rigorous about actually testing some of the things that we're doing. But I think we can get to a place where we feel much more confident in messaging, in content, in design before we launch, just by having learned and iterated during that process.
Yeah. And I think it depends on what you're testing and what the goals are, right? Like if you're a company and you have a new tagline and you love the tag, it's your company, you love the tagline, you can do whatever you want because it's your company, right? And you just want to test it to make sure, like, no red flags, people get it, this isn't like too out there, whatever, right? Then that's fine. You have a few people, you run it through them, you're like, okay, we're good, because it's your company and you can do whatever you want. If you are a big tech company and you have some privacy messaging, right? Maybe you want to be a little more rigorous because it's a lot more, I hate to say important, high profile, right?
Yeah,
it's like, it is important. Stakes are higher. Yeah. So, I mean, I find that in our field as well. Like, we don't test everything. It's like, ideally, you want to test everything before launch and even after launch, and you're constantly testing and improving. In a perfect world, but really that's not what we end up doing. Usually it relates to budget and time, so people always ask, like, how many participants, how many iterative tests? And it's like, there's no magic formula. Ideally, you're going to keep on testing every time you have a change, or until optimal usability is achieved. But that's in a perfect world. Really, in the real world, we've got time and budget constraints, and we do what we can within those constraints, and talk to people. We try as much as possible, but even that, we're not talking about every single thing on an interface. Those are our trade-offs.
Perfect can't be the enemy of good, and you've got to get stuff out there more quickly. Absolutely, from a product and a marketing perspective. But just the idea that that nothing is ever fully baked, right? There's always change happening. And you can move, if it's your company, to your point, the small company with the owner gets to change. They could change any day, anytime they feel like it. And they probably shouldn't change every day, but they can. Whereas the larger company, there's so many more processes to actually make a change, that when you make a big change to something like a tagline that has trickle down for so many different pieces of content and so many different touch points, it's such a big deal that you want to be much more sure before you go and you spend lot of people's time and energy and money making that change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of internal costs and effort at risk to making a change if you don't you want to at least feel somewhat confident that you're heading in the right direction. Knowing that 6 months later, because the market has changed and now your competitors maybe are saying the same thing that you used to say, now, or you acquired a company, there's so many different reasons why you're going to have to change again. But, it's not a light decision for so many of those types of things. There's a lot hanging in the balance.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about in-depth interviews, contextual inquiry, and one of the things we wanted to talk about coming in was partnering with sales. So I'd love to hear other methods you've used. Oh, you mentioned panels. Maybe you can share a bit about that. What is that like? I know that's I've used panels as well, but it seems to be less common in general. So tell me a bit about
from a panel perspective. Yeah, I think the closest thing that I've seen in more of a sales-led organization can be a customer advisory board. And product teams use that as well, right? But there's different questions that you might ask of your customer advisory board if your goal was ultimately to help your go-to-market team or your sales team, than if you were talking to your customer advisory board and you really just wanted product information, right? So you might end up talking to the same people, but you might end up talking to different people also, because at least in many of the tech companies I work with, the sales, product marketing people, go-to-market teams are talking to the buyers, right? The champions, ultimately, often the executive decision makers. And the product people often want to talk to the users, right? People that are, and which might be the same, but it's often a few levels down, and the people that are actually like on the ground, turning the knobs, configuring the system in the tool every day. So your set of questions it might be the same company, but it might be different individuals, are going to be very different depending on whether your customer advisory board is there to help with the product, refine the user experience, or if they're there to talk about the buyer experience. So if I'm doing interviews, whether it's a panel or it's a individual person, and I'm thinking about helping the go-to-market team, what I really want to know is, how do you go about making your buying decisions? What would hold you back from moving forward with this company or, this product? Because there's often a lot of risk when somebody makes a change to make a big purchase that could affect their company. So we want to know where's the friction in the buying process, not the using the product process, but in the buying process. Other questions I love to ask are, if we didn't exist, how would you go about solving this problem? And if they say, well, I guess we would just do it on our own, or we would use an Excel spreadsheet, right? Or I don't know, it doesn't really come up very much, right? And if they have like an easy answer for that, then you're not solving a critical problem for them, right? If it's not causing them so much pain that they need to pay money to solve that problem, right? Then you're not providing the value that you think you are. So there's sort of some tells that can help you determine whether this is a pain that you can ratchet up to help you in the sales process, or maybe you have to go about this a different way to find a different type of pain that you're solving. So all that to say, the type of people you might want in your group might be different, whether you're coming at it for your end result being sales or being product, and your line of questioning might be different. And ultimately, the way that you present that information and use that information might be different.
Yeah. That must be really difficult sometimes. Like I'm on a Bank of America advisory panel. I don't know what you call it, customer panel. And I infrequently participate, which I'm not proud of, because I'm one of those people. I take all the surveys, right? And that's why I agreed to be on this panel. But then I don't remember what friction there was. I digress. I'm just thinking about that company. And if they said, what would you do if we weren't here? And I would just go to a different bank. That's all, right? So like that idea that they're not solving a problem for me because I could very easily just go somewhere else.
Right.
That's difficult. So like, how does a bank is a bank is a bank, but not really. So like, how do they find their niche?
It is hard.
Yeah.
It is hard. Like, and that's why this work is so important, because you have to try to find some kind of differentiated value that they can't solve that problem exactly the same way to the same benefit anyway with somebody else. If it's that easy to switch, that's why people switch banks all the time. You give me a $250 bonus offer for opening up a savings account with you, I'm like, okay. Right?
Keep it open for a little while and close it.
Right. There's got to be something about your brand, about the experience that they have with you, about your relationship. It could be the individual features of your product, but those are so easy to copy in many cases that you can't just hang your hat on that. So and you don't want it to be price, right? Because then it's just a race to the bottom. So poking around to try to find what is it about you that really is different. Are you solving a problem that other people just haven't figured out how to solve? That's like the holy grail.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And it could be something very small. It could be the app that just is like way easier to use. It could be allowing people to have access to their money faster, right? Just like this tiny tweak that makes the world of a difference.
Yeah.
In banking, for example. Yeah.
So in a B2B sales led organization, right, where we're not just talking to, it's not so easy to switch often because they've spent a lot of time and like capital, a buyer has put themselves on the line, right? And so to then say to someone, okay, we're going to rip out all those tools that you guys spent $100,000 for and a bunch of time configuring last year, and now we're going to change to something new. That's a big risk for someone to make. Sure. So there has to be some kind of an argument for them to put themselves on the line to make that switch again. It can't be that easy. So, so it's a challenge. That's why sales is so challenging, and sales is so hungry for the hook, right? What is the message? What is the hook that's going to get someone interested, keep them on the phone, right? Make us stand out and look different from somebody else. I love to be a fly on the wall in those kinds of sales conversations when I can, and listen in, because there's so much that happens at back and forth in a sales conversation that most marketers aren't privy to. We might end up talking to happy customers for case studies, but we're often not on the front lines like the salespeople are. So I love when companies have a tool, like a sales recording tool where they record sales calls like Gong, or there's another company called Chorus. And then you can go through and you can actually listen to those sales calls after the fact. And you can even set up sort of tags or different categories where you're tracking every time somebody talks about, I don't know, in your case might be small business loans or something like that with the bank, but it could also be, I work with a lot of cybersecurity companies. So I want to know whenever they're talking about like the latest compliance change or, a certain type of ransomware or something like that, right? So I can use these kind of tools to just narrow down those conversations, and then I can actually click in and listen in to see what the customer asked. It's so valuable for content as well, because then you're hearing from the customer's voice. How did they phrase their question? How did they raise their concern? What words did they use? And then when we create content or a marketing campaign, we can reflect that back to them so that we're speaking their language. And I love listening in on that rather than getting that filtered message through sales. If you ask a salesperson, what are people saying? They're often going to tell you the thing they heard that morning because it's top of mind. But if you get to look back and you say, oh, over the last quarter, this many people brought up this change in compliance directive in New York, like you're gonna actually be able to hear what those conversations sounded like rather than having it filtered through another audience.
Right. And that makmakes sense, right? Their role is focused on something else. So that's cool. I haven't heard of these tools before. I'm going to shift gears a little bit just because this came to mind. Has AI changed those tools and like the synthesis? It seems like it would be so valuable to take these sales conversations, for example, and be able to synthesize recordings and be able to
Mhm.
out a synthesis of the themes, the trends, how people are talking about things.
Yeah.
Have you used AI at all, or are you aware of how that's changing
Well,
these tools?
within the tools, there's some analytics that are built in, right? So you could what I have found actually though is you kind of have to know what you're looking for. So I have to tell it, like, I want to know when somebody mentions ransomware rather than it telling me
Hmm.
what we're hearing, and here's the pattern.
Mhm.
So the other thing to be careful of with AI is probably what I could do is I could download all of those conversations and then I could upload them into ChatGPT. But if I do
Mhm.
that the way it works today, it would be out in the public sphere for anyone to
Right.
hear, right? And I might have customer names and obviously competitive information, confidential IP information. So you can't just take it from that tool and go put it into an AI. But I am sure that there are ways that you could like anonymize all of that in a way and then go find an AI tool or an AI tool that is private and behind your firewall and nobody else could get to. So I think all of that is coming. Absolutely all of that is coming because there's so much information between social media tools and what people are saying out in the public sphere to what they're having in these private conversations with salespeople, your chat on your website, right? There's no way that in the past we could have analyzed all of that as humans. So now we're going to be able to see patterns and at least know where to focus and where to dig in, thanks to either built-in analytics or what's certainly coming with AI tools.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. I feel like that's a great use case for AI. You know, there's some things that it's like synthesizing information feels like
Mhm.
synthesizing data, any kind of data, you know, especially numerical. I know we're talking about more qualitative here, but like taking massive amounts of information and
Yeah,
synthesizing it, you know,
unstructured.
using a computer to do that instead of a human. That seems like the perfect case study. Yeah.
It is, but there's still nothing like actually listening and marinating in that conversation. But at least the AI tool can tell me, you know, out of 3,000 conversations, these are the 3 where they really talked about that topic, right? And then
Yeah.
I can go and listen to them and just like absorb it and filter it through my own human brain.
Yeah.
So you know, humans aren't going away anytime
Yeah,
soon,
exactly.
but it can focus you and prioritize your work, and that's
Yeah.
where I've seen it be definitely the most helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I can't believe the time always flies by so quickly. We're overtime. Thank you so much. Can you let us know where to find you? If people have questions, they want to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this topic, and this was really fun. So yeah, I'd love to talk with folks. So either find me on LinkedIn, or my website is centerboard-marketing.com. And there's a few resources on there. One is a question guide for if you're interviewing customers and you're doing case studies. I've got a bunch of questions that you can ask as part of the interview process. So there's some free tools on there that might be useful for people, or reach out if you want to have a conversation about how to do this kind of stuff. I'd love to talk with people about sharing ideas.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, great. Take care.
Take care.